It's Nemo Nation, broadcasting from the Fastport Studios at the historic Degas House in the city of New Orleans, just blocks away from where trucking radio first began.
Speaking of not being overrated and being a great American, one of the grand poobahs of radio, CBS, NPR, SiriusXM, WFMU, WYNC, host Aerial View Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on The Hound, NYC.com, and wherever you get your podcast. Founder/guitarist, NYHC Legends Nihilistics at TheNihilistics.com, and owns That Cave Antiques, eBay/Reverb. It is our pleasure to tell an old friend hello. I got a chance to talk to him about a week and a half ago or so, to do a little bit of a mic test to make sure that the hookup was outstanding. We got a chance to say, hey, Dave, why don't you say good morning to Chris T?
You know, I'm kind of reminded back in the old days when I would say, well, coming up right after news and weather, it's Chris T and Meredith Oaks with Freewheeling here on XM.
Yeah, on XM.
Yeah.
On XM.
Hey, Chris, good morning, man. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. This is very, very strange and bizarre because I just did some checking and I found out it was like 20 years ago, right around now, that the late, great Jeremy Tepper reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come and do a show on the trucking channel? They're giving me the trucking channel to revamp. And it's hard to believe 20 years have gone by. I mean, Dave, you've been at this since what, 1968, 1969?
Yeah. Well, Trucking Radio 71, but, who's counting?
But shooting his suck off on the air 68, 69, yeah.
Right, yeah. So here we are all again, the old gang, gathered for one last heist.
Oh, I love that, by the way. Dre, set the timer. Here we go. One more time. If you make it to the door, just don't take the exit to go kill Wayne Grow, and maybe you'll make the airport at LAX. Yeah, it's good to have you, Chris. Good to have you, man.
It's good to talk to you. How do you guys feel being independent at this point?
Well, we're here. Kind of like doing the same thing that we've ever done. Just in a different location, circling back to New Orleans here. We're within walking distance of the studios on Rampart Street where Charlie Douglas started it all. So it's it's like a reunion in a sense and a new venture all at the same time. I know that's pablum, but that's
I got to tell you, Chris, one of the things that we have loved, and Dave, I can't speak for Dave, but I can speak for Dre and I, although Dave has made mention of this. The shows go by faster. The shows are more fun. We make the joke about corporate overlords not getting emails telling us to temper what we say, or, people. Right. I'll be really blunt. Not having people literally looking over your shoulder. It's kind of like back in the day when you get kind of left alone. I wanted to ask you a question because it applies to you as well, because you got started right at the top as well too. You and Dave kind of began the adventure when Sirius didn't have a lot of folks subscribing. Basically, you guys kind of started. I made the comment before you came on this morning that in many ways, trucking radio built those platforms. It built them. You guys were responsible.
There, when I showed up there, it was even earlier than that. It was 2003 around there, because of the good doctor who was a DJ on WFMU reached out to me and said, I'm revamping the Blues Channel. Do you want to come and do a show on the Blues Channel? So even before Jeremy Tepper lured me away from, I was working at the NPR New York Bureau at the time, and I had just gotten into the union, and it was like the most secure job that I had ever had in my life. I grew up, blue collar, working class, and that to me was like security. I have a job, but as I said at Jeremy's memorial, he sort of convinced me that I needed to be on mic, because I was on the wrong side of the glass. I was engineering, and he knew that I had done this talk show for many years on WFMU called Aerial View. And he said, no, you're supposed to be on mic. You're supposed to be doing this. And it was his belief in me that had me saying goodbye to a union job to go to a place where I could have been fired in a couple of weeks. But I had been working freelance as a gig employee, really, on the Blues Channel for a couple of years, where I used the name Chris Tedesco on the air because nobody could say my last name or spell it They couldn't pronounce it. So, and that's how I became Chris T. I've been Chris T since I was 17, 18 years old in a, New York hardcore band called the Nihilistic. So I was Chris T for a long time, and that just sort of transferred to being on the air. But when I showed up there was no Howard Stern wing yet. He hadn't been hired yet by the company, and it was still this fairly new thing where everybody was trying to figure out, well, what is the real value in this? And to me, and the thing that I used to, Dave, you might agree with this, you might not, I used to butt heads all the time with management, is that the thing that makes us unique is the live radio. The fact that folks can call in and be on live. You're not going to get that from anything else. Wall to wall, treetop tall, drivers from Canada or, into the United States being able to interact with hosts on the air. But to Jimmy Mack's point, it got to be to where these folks were getting involved in everything having to do with the creative act of going on the air and hosting a talk show. And to me, it was like a case of like, you can't do what I do, but you want to get involved in doing what I do because you don't trust my expertise to do what I do. And it was the fact that there was no trust anymore, and they had to justify their middle management pay by mucking up everything that really started to give me migraines. I would wake up sometimes in the morning, put my feet on the floor and say, how much longer do I have to do this? Because I couldn't take the amount of involvement that was happening. And one day I didn't have to do it anymore. Ironically enough, we had just done a show called Long May You Run. That was the best part. Was after doing that show on a Friday, we got called into an office and said, we're going in a new direction. And we all know what that means, don't we?
Yeah, and the other thing is the fact that this is I'm get myself in trouble for like quoting Shakespeare because I have this crazy idea that the men and women out there listening might actually read books and might actually think for themselves. And I've often described some of the characters that you've talked about. There's a line from Shakespeare where he says, "Petty men who peep about their legs and find for themselves dishonorable graves." And so much of what a lot of the drivers, I think, don't understand, and I don't mean like would not grasp, just don't understand, is the fact that so much of, I'm going to be really blunt here. OIDA talks about it all the time, turning truck drivers into a piggy bank, by which, you kind of, create channels for them and then significantly dismantle those channels because you really just want to drive people to other channels as well and not giving them what they want. And it becomes kind of this ongoing fight to kind of give the listeners what they want against what the people who run these things want the listeners to go check out something else. Am I making sense? That land at all for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I would say is that they began to strip all of these elements from our show that they thought could be found elsewhere on the service. So we have channels for that. We have channels for this, and we don't need that on this channel. And my argument would be like, yeah, but bringing these people on and putting them in front of a trucking audience is a different thing entirely. And why can't we have nice things too? It just got to be to the point where, it had run its course, and I didn't know how to do it anymore and please them at the same time, because we had a series of managers come in, and they all had different ideas and they all wanted to reconfigure things. And, I just thought, where's the respect for the difficult, job that we do every day? It's not easy, Dave, as you know, hosting a daily phone-in talk show where over the course of many hours, you have to be relevant and informative and entertaining. And the idea that you can do that even when the phones go down and no one's calling in is a skill. But it wasn't a skill that I felt they respected all that much, unfortunately.
Well, that's an interesting take, and I think you're really spot on in terms of, checking all of the boxes that needed to be checked or were checked through the course of events. They were changing direction thing. Similar thing happened to us. But that happens in the biz too. There's that. But what I think the component that upper management and then through them middle management starts to absorb is that It's a trucking channel. We're going to talk about trucks. We may talk about trailers too, but we're certainly talking trucks, and that's it. Over here, we're going to talk golf. We may talk about golf carts and maybe some grass, but that's about it. And for the golfer, that's wonderful. But for the truck driver, it ain't. And the reason of it is because the truck driver's not going to get off the course, get in his car, and go home. He has a life away from that golf course. He has a life away from that office. The truck driver, yeah, of course they have lives away from the truck, but on a 24-hour basis, they don't. They're in that truck for 24 hours. That's their life. That's where their life is. And we, back in the early 70s, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of self-aggrandizement. Anyway, Charlie Douglas told me that if I was going to succeed in this, then I have to be myself. Don't be a phony. A truck driver can spot a phony a mile away. All of that stuff I've said so many times before. But what I'm getting at is that they leave the human connective component out of it. Yeah, you want to talk about trucks and once in a while about trailers, but what about the person behind the wheel? And it circles back to something I've been saying lately. When a guy in an SUV cuts you off in the road, you yell and scream at him, he's an idiot, he's a stupid, blah, 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 blah. You never say, well, look at that Toyota. But when a truck driver does something, or if you perceive it to be, you don't say, look at that Kenworth, look at that Volvo. No, you say, you don't say, look at that. I'm sorry, I did that backwards. You don't say, look at that idiot driving that truck. You say, look at that truck. Oh, that truck cut me off. Big truck cut me off. No, the big truck didn't do a damn thing. Guy behind the wheel did it, but you don't even know there's a guy behind the wheel. And I think that is the connection that has been lost, or maybe it never even connected with upper management, middle management through the decades.
I had a guy tell me, an ad sales guy tell me in an elevator, that we were the number 2 channel, the Road Dog channel, behind the Howard Stern channel in terms of ad revenue. And yet we would go to these trade shows and you would never see any signage for a live event we'd be doing, a live broadcast. And every time I'd be saying, can we get some signage out here? There was other broadcasters there. There were signs all over. You'd walk into the, Kentucky Exposition Center, or you'd walk into the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center in Dallas, and you wouldn't see any signs that we're doing a live broadcast. And it was I always felt like this thing just doesn't get fed the way that it should be fed. And they just see these folks, as you said earlier, as like a piggy bank, a way to make some coin. And my response to the question when we would be asked, what do you know about truck driving? You never drove a truck. I'd be like, well, we know about truck drivers, and truck drivers are at the center of our show. We want to learn who these people are. We want to know these people. And look, I still have some friends from, I haven't been on the air there since 2018. I think it was April 2018. But I still talk to a few folks that I became friendly with, especially at these live events, because it's easy for people to think what they think when you're on the air. When they meet you in person, it's a different thing entirely. So I'm proud of that fact that there are still drivers that are in touch with me and I still keep up with and talk to. But those were the very same drivers we'd be told over and over again, don't take the same calls from the same people every day. These people, they're calling too often. And we would be like, they feel a connection to this thing. They feel connected to us. And what is wrong with that? Why can't we have folks
get connected to one another? Drivers meet, you're talking about going to the shows. How many drivers can you count? You can't count the number of drivers who met one another and are still friends today. They may have met 10, 15, 20 years ago at these truck shows,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And look, the last time I turned it on, because I bought an electric car back in June, and it came with, some SiriusXM on it. And I turned on the trucking channel, and I think I said this to you, David, it doesn't sound good. The sound quality is terrible at this point. It sounds like wishy-washy MP3 sound quality. And they keep squeezing it so they can take the bandwidth away from that channel and give it to other channels. They find some celebrity influencer who's got hundreds of thousands of followers, and they decide, let's put this person on the radio. never knowing whether or not that person can do a radio show. I mean, it's the David Lee Roth syndrome. If you remember when they tried to make David Lee Roth into a DJ and it failed miserably,
Yeah.
because David Lee Roth was good at being a rock star. It doesn't mean you're good at doing radio. So again, there's that respect for this job, the job of like doing an entertaining radio show that I just didn't feel anymore coming from those folks. They thought they could stick anybody, literally anybody in front of a microphone and have them take calls and answer questions. And I don't know how that's working out for them.
It by the way, it's happening right now over on the channel. I mean, and like I said, you talk about the idea of the middle management problems. My issues, by the way, and this is me being generous towards the middle management, my issues were less with middle management and more with salespeople who actually focused on things other than sales, who suddenly viewed themselves as a programmer and a discerner of what it was truck drivers wanted to hear. Or worse than that, how about this? Because at least if you are trying to discern what truck drivers want to hear, you actually care. As opposed to believing that, what's the great line that there's some people who think they're pitching an oasis when in fact they're pitching a mirage, and they think that people are willing to drink the sand. And will put people into seats just because I can make anybody work. Because there was one person at the end who actually sent a very passive-aggressive email to Dave at the end. And what he said was, I was always thrilled that I could always help you out by selling for you. And as if to somehow suggest, well, wait, you weren't selling for me. Weren't you supposed to be selling me? And that, I remember that I'm being like, I don't think you understand what your job is, by the way, if that in fact is what you're doing. It's an interesting thing too, because at some point these guys are really smart. And this, the men and women who listen to this stuff are really smart, and they begin to figure out when they're being sold a bill of goods, when they're being given something and told, this is what you're supposed to like, as opposed to this is what you like. And that's
Here's
always
the thing I can never understand. And to use a truck analogy, like we were the cab, right? We're the engine driving this thing. We're trying to get people to listen to it, which isn't easy, right? And we're trying to get people to stay loyal. And not only that, to use the products that are being advertised on the show and visit the sponsors and so on. But I always felt like we were the trailer, that other things were more important, whether it was the ad sales department or engineering department or whoever it was. And not that I wanted to have the hubris of like, hey, I'm the talent. I never thought that of myself. I thought, we're the first line of defense. We're trying to get people interested in this and listening to it. And that's not easy to do, but somehow you think it is. Maybe we make it look too easy. That could be the problem, but I don't know. I just never understood why the programming wasn't paramount. You know what I mean, Dave?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to ask you
captive audience syndrome.
Or believing you have a captive audience. That's the thing. Believing you have a captive audience and believing that eventually it becomes almost like the state withers away, the channel dies, but they stick on the SiriusXM platform.
Let me just interject something that's not 100%, but in a sense, before the explosion of the internet, where we are now, streaming, before streaming, it was kind of a captive audience. Because you really didn't have anything else to listen to that pertained in any way to you, especially during the daytime. Now at night, if some of the old all-night shows were still on for a while, but the AM radio thing went away, altogether. So
it's not even in my new car. A 2023 car doesn't have AM radio in it. I was amazed. I tried to listen to a Mets game the other day. The Mets are out of it. So
it's an electric car.
It's an electric car.
Yeah, AM takes too much juice.
Yeah, but there was a big fight that Ted Cruz, I'll put it this way, Ted Cruz and Senator Markey actually got together in a desperate attempt to stop that from happening.
Right.
To stop them from removing AM radio from those cars, and they ended up losing the argument. And when two guys on completely opposite sides of the aisle lose that argument, there's a real problem. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris. I'm just we're all over the place in kind of an exciting way here.
I mean, to your point, I listen on an app now. I have to open an app in the car to listen to the Mets game. It's a little ridiculous, but I'm grateful that this is there so that folks can get, Dave Nemo directly. They don't need the middleman anymore. That's what, guys like Joe Rogan and other podcasters have proven, and some of them that still do live shows, because my thing was always live radio, and that's the thing I love the most. But the idea that you don't need, a middleman, you don't need somebody laying in between you and your audience. You can go direct to the audience and have a lot more freedom and have a lot more independence, and not have ridiculous emails coming to you from folks who are like, if you stuck them on the air for 10 minutes, it'd be worse than the Hindenburg disaster.
I think we should actually force them to do it, to be honest with you, Chris. I think we should at some point say, you know what, dude, we're gonna put you in front of a mic. Go ahead and go. Go ahead and make it happen for us. Prove to us how easy this is. Sorry.
Dave, how many times has someone said to you they ought to put me on the radio? I used to get that all the time. I'd be like, when do you want to do it? I'll give you 30 minutes. Come on out. Come and do 30 minutes. I want to hear you on the radio. Because again, just like driving a truck is a skill set, and I respect that skill set, hosting a radio show is a skill set. Not everybody can do it. And, I'm glad that you decided to keep doing it.
I'm going to say something, and then I have a question I want to ask you about you. Everybody in this country has to stop being dismissive of everybody else's skill set. I'm at that point now. If a truck driver wants respect, then they need to respect what a doctor does. If a doctor wants respect, they need to respect what a truck driver does. And I'm at the point now where I'm so tired of everybody questioning everybody else's expertise and yet getting butthurt when their own expertise gets questioned. I mean, I wish we would come to a point in this country where it would be like, you know what, you're really good at what you do, and I'm really good at what you do. I do. So why don't we just trust each other's opinion on that thing and not turn ourselves into a constitutional attorney or an over-the-road truck driver, despite the fact that we practice neither thing.
Suzanne on YouTube says, "Hey, Christine."
Hello, Suzanne. How are you?
We got that out there. Okay, so tell us about you. Tell us what's going on in the world of Christy. What you got cooking, what you got going, what you're excited about.
I mean, I'm mostly retired at this point. I do the occasional freelance audio gig, and I joined the Elks Lodge back in November, my local Elks Lodge, because I wanted to meet my neighbors in real life, which is what I try to say to folks when they say, why did you become an elk? The Elks are a fraternal organization, been around since the late 1800s, and I host karaoke every other Friday night there, and I've been finding a lot more joy in doing that than I ever thought. It's pretty interesting when folks get up and sing in front of a crowd. And I'm working on a book about my days in the New York hardcore scene and how me and my best friend who started this band, he ended up being the guy that tried to murder me one night in November. And so I'm trying to tell that story and get that out there. My dream is to one day be sitting in a bookstore reading from my own book and doing a Q&A about that very same book. So that's kind of how I'm occupying myself. But my wife, Sweet Tea, if the drivers remember Sweet Tea, she retired a couple of years ago. So we get to spend our time, doing what we like. And that's an enormous freedom. I know not everybody has that opportunity, but I got to, again, be grateful to Jeremy Tepper because, without him and without that gig, and without the 401k that I socked a lot of money in as I was working there all those years, life would be different right now. And so I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to do that and for the folks who allowed me to come and be on the air. I just think that the unfortunate thing that's gone on in this country, Jimmy, in addition to, the devaluing of expertise, is that everything is driven by shareholders. So that once SiriusXM started focusing on nothing but returning value to the investor, I think that's when they began to lose their way. Because initially it wasn't like that. Initially you felt like the programmer got respect and the programmer was driving the thing. But then at some point it was like, no, we need to raise the stock value. And I think that's always a mistake, whether it's that company or any other company.
Well, yeah, and the idea is that it's the bottom, the bottom line. But believe me, I understand the bottom line, and I understand that it has to often be met. But making the bottom line from a minute by minute situation is a very different and very destructive thing, as opposed to looking at 3-year plans, 5-year plans, long term growth, and all that. There's got to be some way where we look at things and say, hey, we're going to be a little patient here, and the whole thing doesn't have to turn around overnight, and you don't need to make a profit every single second of the day. Sometimes the long haul investment, as we all know too well from this job, is often the investment that pays off the most, as you're discovering right now, by the way. By the way, just to kind of put us all in perspective, I had a good talk with James Parker, who actually does the Dear James column over the Atlantic and has been on this show a number of times. Just to put it in perspective, speaking of music, you realize that Double Nickels on the Dime by the Minutemen is over 40 years old now?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Look, my friend Bruce, I interviewed my friend Bruce. He was in a band called Adrenaline OD from New Jersey, famous New Jersey hardcore band. And he said, it's 60-year-old guys talking about 40-year-old music made by 20-year-olds. So I quote his line all the time. That's what's going on now. You have all this interest. I went to the CBGB festival on Saturday in Brooklyn, and I couldn't believe all the young people, especially, that were there getting into this music, that's been around a moment now. But punk rock and hardcore music is having its moment currently. So there is still a lot of interest in that, and I'm grateful for that. And who knew that a band that I was in, started back in 1980, 1981, 82, people would still care about and still be talking about. But that's the case. So interesting place to be.
Trucker Bosun just wrote in our chat, they went from fighting the establishment to being the establishment. And yeah, because Dave talked about this too, the idea we had 1,700 subscribers when you made the leap over there. And in many ways, you guys actually got started over there right as AM radio was being hijacked by a series of lies and distortions in regards to its listenership. And it just turns out that the revolution just continues to move a little further out west. Chris T has joined us this morning. We're out of time. Where can they find you, Chris? Best place to find you?
The best place to find me is at the Weehawken Elks Lodge on Boulevard. I mean, online, Facebook. I'm on Facebook under my actual name, which is TSAKIS, Sakis, and on Instagram under the same thing. I mean, in terms of social media, that's where you can find me. My website really needs to be rebuilt, but it's mylastname.com. So you could always go to the website, but that thing has tumbleweeds blowing through it at this point. I got to rebuild it.
That's okay. That's okay. We all have to make the leap from MySpace at some point or another. Thank you, Chris, by the way. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. You're welcome back anytime. And promise me when you finish that book, we do at least 3 to 4 books a week over here because we actually know these guys read and listen. So we'd love to have you back for that, but sooner rather than later. Okay?
Well, it's really been a thrill, and thank you for asking me to join you for a little bit here this morning. And good luck down the line, man.